how I learned banjo was basically the wrong way to do everything. I did everything super backwards. Also, just like the weirdness that we bring to the table just from the people that we are. I've always said, like, if we're nothing else, we're unique or we're original. You know, we're not trying to copy anyone else. You know, we're never like, trying to do anything in anyone else's style.
Hey, what's up? How's everybody doing today? This is Keith Billick with another quarantined episode of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. You know, it's not like I actually am ever social when I'm recording these things anyway, but I did make some small progress. As a lot of you who are regular listeners might remember, last summer I recorded some episodes from my backyard. Well, I did take some steps. I'm still in my basement right now, but I did take some steps. I set up the canopy tent is set up, and that's ready to go. So I'm thinking by the next episode, you will probably be able to hear the evening sounds of, I don't know, crickets and whatever else comes out in my hometown here. And I really look forward to having some fresh air while I'm recording these rather than just locked in my basement here. But that's how it is for now. So I'll deal with it if you promise to deal with some nature sounds in the background for some of these upcoming ones. I also sincerely hope that everyone out there listening is hanging in there okay with all of this. And I know that depending on where we live, we all have varying degrees of, abilities to go out and interact with people and maybe see some friends, maybe even play some music again. But for a lot of us, that's still not really possible. And I'll just use this opportunity as another reminder that a lot of your favorite banjo players are probably sidelined for the time being without any income. So if you're at all able to, I know a lot of my favorite banjoists, a lot of the same ones that you've heard on this podcast are doing those, live over the internet concerts, and they'll accept some tips. A lot of them are doing online lessons. So if that's something you're able to do or think you would even enjoy or benefit from, please check into that, because that's helping support these people to continue doing what they love and what we love hearing from them. So check into that, and thanks for everyone who has participated in supporting those artists. On a similar note, the only money that this podcast makes is directly from you listeners via my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/banjopodcast. Basically, the deal with Patreon is you go there, you sign up to donate as little as $1 per month on up, and that goes to support the show. And there are some really cool rewards at various price points. One of them is for only $4 a month. There's this guy named Eli Gilbert, who is a great teacher, great musician, and a talented maker of instructional videos. And what he does is he makes a custom instructional video for each episode of this podcast, and that's available to certain patrons on that site. So even just those Eli Gilbert lessons are worth the money right there, but you'll also get to know that you're helping to support this podcast and keep me in business doing this thing for as long as possible. Another reward is for me to personally thank you for your generosity on this podcast. And today I have two such people. Supporter number one of today's podcast, although these are not in any particular order. But anyway, the first supporter is Michigan's own Annie Capps, who is known around the state for performing under the group Annie and Rod Capps, and we actually share a mandolin player, Jason Denny, although she wins that battle most of the time. But anyway, Annie's well known on the Michigan music scene, and she usually plays guitar, but she got started on banjo by her 80-year-old mother-in-law. So mother-in-law, wherever you are, good on you for spreading the word on the banjo, and good on you, Annie, for supporting the podcast, and I hope to see you around really soon. The second supporter of today's show is Rich and Susan Southward. Rich is the banjo player, but Susan is probably even more important. She is apparently his number one fan. Hopefully that's still the case, even after all this quarantine. That can that might change people's attitudes a little bit. So anyway, Susan, thank you for supporting Rich. Rich, thank you for supporting the show. And thank you to both Rich and Annie for your generosity on the Patreon site. Once again, that's patreon.com/banjopodcast to learn how you can become a supporter of the show.
So take everything from me. This moment, a distant memory.
The special guest for this episode is Torrin Daniels of the band called the Kitchen Dwellers. The Kitchen Dwellers call their style of music galaxy grass, and that's definitely a pretty accurate description, I think, because there's undoubtedly a bluegrass influence. They have bluegrass instruments, and that's just an element that runs through a lot of their songs. However, galaxy comes out because they're not afraid to get spacey, they're not afraid to get experimental, they're not afraid to use a lot of effect pedals that just end up making everything sound a little sideways compared to what we might be used to from traditional bluegrass. But they're making a name for themselves in the jamgrass scene, and Torrin here is a big part of that. He not only plays banjo, but he's one of those rare banjo-playing lead vocalists, so he's a big part of that sound. It was real fun digging deep with him into what makes his unique style work for him, because he definitely does have a little bit of a less conventional playing style, and he's going to talk all about that. And I loved hearing about that, loved hearing about his influences, his equipment. Like I said, he does use a lot of pedals, and definitely loved hearing about the effect that Chris Pandolfi, veteran of the Picky Fingers podcast, had on producing their new album. So really can't wait for you to hear it. Here it is. One last note. This was recorded at the Parliament Room at Otis Supply here in Ferndale, Michigan. So thanks to those guys over there for being accommodating for the podcast guy to haul all his microphones in and set aside some space for us to record this interview. And that also explains if you hear some random restaurant type noises in the background. Shouldn't be too bad though. And also one last note, there are a small handful of grown-up words thrown out there throughout the interview. So if that's something that you don't want to hear or don't want someone else who is listening with you to hear, here's your warning. Other than that, here we go. Enjoy this interview with Torrin Daniels.
I'm Torrin Daniels. I play the banjo in a band called the Kitchen Dwellers. I'm from Montana, and I guess I didn't find the banjo until I started listening to and playing bluegrass, which wasn't until I was probably like a senior in high school. I'd played a lot of instruments beforehand and always been really into music. I started out playing drums in like fourth grade.
Okay.
For like years and years. And
are we talking school band drums or like
it started with
garage
school
rock
band and then
Okay.
like garage rock band, and then I bought a drum set, and I still have a drum set at my house. And I played in a few bands in high school and stuff like that outside of school, and played drums for a couple different groups of folks. And then I think I discovered bluegrass through basically through like the Grateful Dead and Fish, and then through that discovered Yonder Mountain String Band, and that was kind of like my intro to bluegrass.
Okay, so like the Grateful Dead going backwards through Old and in the Way, or Fish kind of had their bluegrass phase too that they did.
Yeah, and I think I actually didn't listen to really any old timey or traditional bluegrass for quite a while, just because Yonder Mountain String Band was kind of one of those bands that came up with when people talked about Fish or Widespread Panic or something like that, a lot of jam bands, and Yonder was sort of like my introduction to that. So
Okay.
yeah.
And were you discovering that on your own, or were some of your buddies all on board with this too?
It was like me and a couple of my other friends. I'm from rural Montana. I grew up in, my family moved between Montana and Wyoming a few times when I was a kid, but always super rural. My grandparents lived like 75 miles from the nearest town.
Oh my.
And I grew up in Joliet, Montana, and I graduated in a class of like 30 kids. So really, like, it was a lot of just like finding your own type of music. And I think when we first moved there, I was like really into punk rock and like, just kind of like being like the weird music kid sort of attracts other people really quickly in that setting when there's not very many other people.
You can find each other pretty easily.
Yeah, where like a lot of the people, the only thing you have in common with is that you're all sitting in chairs facing in the same direction in a classroom. But like,
exactly.
there's a few people that you connect with like right away in that setting just because you kind of have to. But so there was like, there's a few of us that like got into sort of all that same music scene together.
So what was it about the banjo that drew you to it?
I think I just got a banjo because I had like bought a guitar and taught myself how to play guitar after knowing drums for a while, and then I bought a mandolin and sort of figured out how to play mandolin, and then banjo was just like the next one that I just kind of wanted to work on, just because I was getting into playing stringed instruments and jamming with my friends and stuff like that, and playing a lot of music together. So yeah, I guess banjo just seemed like the next logical step. But I didn't actually ever play banjo for a band until I joined the Kitchen Dwellers in college.
Oh, interesting.
And I met Sean on like my first day of freshman year.
In what college are we talking?
In Montana State, in Bozeman. We all of us in the Kitchen Dwellers went to MSU. So yeah, and we like met in like an environmental studies class, and yeah, Sean was just basically talking about being from Telluride. We were like talking about skiing because that's like the go-to.
That's where he's from?
In Montana. Yeah, he's from Telluride.
Okay.
So like, at Bozeman, everyone just like goes to school there to ski because the skiing is world class. So it's like lots of people, freshman year, just kind of like trying to figure out who they're going to be ski bumming with and stuff.
And that's you too. You're a big time skier.
I snowboard, but basically, same thing. But yeah, so I met Sean, and he was talking about playing music with people, and I was like, well, I play music, and he was talking about bluegrass, and I was like, oh, well, I have a mandolin. He was like, well, I play mandolin, and I was like, oh shit, all right, sorry, dude. And then, but then he's like, well, we need a banjo player, and I was like, well, I own a banjo, and he's like, well, that's good enough, and so that's kind of how it all started. Yeah. So, and when I first started, I played banjo just with like guitar pick, like tremolo, like like kind of like the guy from Trampled.
Right.
Kind of like Dave from Trampled, and I didn't figure out Scruggs style for like maybe like a year or two of doing that, and then I finally just like sat down one day and was like, I got to figure this out. I got to do this.
And how exactly did you do that? Did you have teachers or books or something?
I just sat down on the internet and looked up some tablature, and I watched videos of Foggy Mountain Breakdown over and over and over and over and over again, and finally just kind of like just figured it out from that. So
who were your favorite players at that point? I imagine you'd probably branched out a little from just the Yonder Mountain stuff.
Totally. But it was always, our introduction, I guess, in Montana, for at least a lot of people that I know, is all jamgrass. So it's like Railroad Earth and Infamous String Dusters. But yeah, by that time, definitely like had a few favorites. I'd obviously seen a bunch more shows being in college and stuff, and not as rural of a setting as I grew up in. So like Noam Pikelny from Punch Brothers, Andy Thorne right away. He's a good friend now, but I remember like the first time I saw him was in Emmett Nershi Band. was just like, that's awesome. That's super cool.
And they were actually coming around for you to go see in person?
Yeah. They used to, Emmett Nursery Band used to tour all the ski towns through like Montana and Idaho and Colorado and stuff. So they would come up like once or twice a year. There was like a New Year's run one time in Jackson Hole that we went to and stuff like that. So we used to see them a lot actually back in the day. So
that's real cool.
Yeah, but yeah, Andy Thorne right off the bat, you just tell something about him. Just could tell I like that guy.
Yeah. Well, he's a good guy to be influenced by for sure.
Yes, he's the man.
What do you think your main takeaways were from seeing those bands, and how have you incorporated it into what you guys are doing?
I think a lot of it, I mean, a lot of our approach to music just as a band is just kind of, we just do our own thing. We're definitely not very concerned at all with genre or certain styles. It's more about serving the song, I guess, whatever type of song we're writing or working on. But all of us come from very different backgrounds. Like, I mean, Sean grew up in Telluride, and his parents are Deadheads, so like that's a whole, part of the culture that he has just been immersed in his entire life, basically. And I grew up in Montana, and all my family's farmers and ranchers, and I grew up, listening to like Waylon Jennings and Merle Haggard and cowboy artists like Chris Ledoux or something comparative to like Coulter Wall or things like that. But then like eventually got really into punk rock and metal and stuff like that. So that's sort of my background. Max is from Crystal Lake, Illinois, and his whole family is his dad's super into the Beatles, and he's super influenced by like 70s guitar players. And Max is a really good electric guitar player too. So he takes away a lot of those styles from a lot of classic rock. And then Joe, our bass player, who's from Alaska, his favorite band is Pretty Lights. So
I'm not familiar. What is that?
It's an electronic producer. It's one guy. Well, but it used to be a producer, and then he played with the drummer Adam Deitch, who plays drums for Lettuce now.
Okay, yeah, I know that.
And it's just like it's kind of down tempo-y, funky electronica. But like sometimes he does live band stuff with Lettuce that is, has horns and like a whole funk band with him and stuff. Okay. And it's pretty cool. It's like a very cool part of the electronic scene. I'm not really into very much electronic music at all, but like that is like one artist that I could definitely
where it creeps
vibe
in
with.
there in a nice way.
Yeah. So like Joe's influence is totally taken from like EDM and some and like old school hip hop and electronic and stuff like that. So our approach as a band as a whole is like just kind of from left field all over. It's Sean is super into bluegrass, and he's very into traditional bluegrass, but not a lot of us listen to a ton of bluegrass on a regular basis. So we are, that affects our approach to music, in the way that we kind of just do whatever we're feeling, and if it takes some extracurricular techniques along the way, then that's how we're going to do it. So,
are there any extracurricular techniques, like specifically, that you would want to talk about that you've brought to the banjo?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, I just got this Neckville Phantom model. I think it's from like '98, but I got it in Carter's in Nashville a couple years ago. We were going through, and it was like time for us to make a few instrument upgrades. And so Sean and I hit up our buddy Billy Strings,
sure.
And we were like, we're in Nashville for a couple days. We actually have extra money to spend, so like, where should we go?
Let's do this. Yeah.
And he's like, go to Carter's, man, hands down. Don't even go anywhere else. And we walked in there, and this was like the one banjo that I just really vibed with in there, just because they're different. Neckville's super different compared to a lot of 5-string. Companies out there and stuff. So, I just vibed with it right away and really liked playing it. And it's kind of weird, and it's all the hardware's black and it's kind of metal. So
it harkens back to your high school aesthetic.
Yes, 7th grade me was really digging it when I saw it in Carter's. But so like it came with these weird.
Yeah, this is very strange. That's what those are.
Yeah, they're like those. I can't remember what they're called, the locking ones, where you can set them on the back.
Oh, like people having like on a Telecaster.
Or like you can get them on banjo too. The locking tuners.
Yeah, the D tuners. But I've never seen ones like this.
And I hadn't either. And they just came on there, but it was also used. It was a used banjo when I got it, and I asked the guys at Neckville about it, and they're like, "We don't make those," so I don't know where they came from, but.
Yeah, that is strange. Can you use those in the same way to like play the detuner songs?
Yeah, you
or do they
can.
not-
You can, but I guess I don't really know very many of those. So I use them like because you can take them off and put them on different tuners. They're not just set on one specific one. So like this one was on the middle G when I first got it, and I moved it to the low D. From some of the songs we play are like sort of banjo metally, so I can really get like weird effects going on there, and also just for like if I flip it and tune it down, play like a drop C, like for some like weird Hartford like what's that song on the road. I've been messing around with that a lot lately, but yeah, some extra weird techniques. We use a lot of effects too, so that's part of it.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to ask you about that. You probably, like even other people who play in real jammy electric bands, that tend to, it's tough to find ones that work well for a banjo.
And it's been a rabbit hole like ever since the beginning, and a lot of it didn't turn out well in the beginning. Like I was really experimenting, and I imagine like people got kind of tired of like hearing, certain, people in the band or people at the show and like me hitting a pedal and just like everything freaking out and getting like creating a feedback machine,
just
basically.
A nuclear explosion.
Yeah. So it's been like a long process getting through all this, but I finally like kind of found what works for me and taken some tips from other players. Andy Thorne, when he first met us when we were a lot younger, he was like, he told me to stuff it when we play electric, stuff the resonator with some stuff, and I think I did it like right then and there, just like pulled out a t-shirt from my bag and stuffed it before our gig.
And you think that helped quite a bit?
That definitely helps cancel some of the weird overtones. I also like nowadays we all run in-ears, so like it's not an issue for us anymore,
Yeah,
it
was
used
more
to
when
be
you had the monitors
used to be way more an issue when we had wedges, but it's been a crazy process, but also using this Neckville pickup that I got in here too is super cool. Tom Neckville's just kind of a crazy guy.
Yeah,
have you met him before?
Yeah, he's been on the podcast.
Oh,
before,
nice. Yeah,
so
he's awesome, and all the guys that work there are super awesome. I call them all the time with like weird questions and stuff like that, and they're super helpful.
He's real happy to get as nerdy as you need him to be.
Yeah. Whenever, he's like an alien. You can just tell like that he just like thinks about banjos like 24/7. And it's awesome. It's so cool. But yeah, so the warp drive pickup, I think is what it's called, is basically I have a piezo under the bridge, and then basically the equivalent of a humbucker, I guess, further down towards the neck.
Okay.
It's like a single coil pickup, but there's two of them, so I think it's a humbucker. But
typically.
And then you just blend them together, so you can get like a lot of the gain, like the high up picking close to the bridge for bluegrass stuff, but also it responds really well to the effects, which is super cool.
And are you able to adjust the balance between how they're blended?
It's inside, so I only do it if it's like in certain rooms. If something sounds a little weird, then I can like tweak it with our front of house guy before or during sound check. But other than that, it just stays kind of where it is. But yeah, so I've went through a long process of figuring out like. I have like a noise gate that I put on. Yeah,
tell us where you're at now.
Yeah,
like what's on your feet?
So I have a Grace Felix DI, which is like the nicest part of the pedal board. It's cool.
Yeah,
they're so awesome. And so that's like, the best tone that it picks up everything about your instrument so nicely. And then out of that, I go straight into this noise gate. It's like a WMD noise gate, and it's super old. I've had it for a long time, and it's basically it can just like put a limiter on if you're getting any feedback. If you're not playing at all, it just kind of cancels any of that.
Okay.
So I put any of the pedals that have a tendency to do that on that loop. So like I have a Qtron envelope filter, like the Jerry pedal, and so that can get kind of wonky sometimes. So I put it on that loop there to just kind of cancel everything out. And then
this is a loop in the Felix. The Felix has
a loop coming out of there, and then this is another loop inside my effects loop.
Okay.
And then going out of that Qtron, I have like a little 7-band EQ, which I learned a trick from the Green Sky guys. They use those a lot to sort of boost certain frequencies in the room. Depending on what room you're in, you can kind of like change the sound your pedal's making to kind of fit the room, because like an envelope filter is kind of super sensitive to kind of what space you're in, I guess. It can sound like too harsh or it can get too quacky or too gainy or something like that, depending on what room you're in. I'm probably not using any of the correct terms. My front of house guy would be freaking out right now, but you can just kind of dial anything back that you need to make it sound kind of perfect every time to get that kind of wow, wow, wow thing.
Yeah.
And then after that, I have a Archer pedal, which is a remake of this tube screamer sort of pedal called the Klon that was like from the 60s or 70s.
Yeah,
that was really
Centaur.
popular. Yeah. And it's just like a remake of that, and it's super nice because I'm trying to get sort of some crunch out of. We play like some sort of banjo-y metal that's kind of like it's like prog rocky kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the one it's on our new album. It's called The Living Dread. Which I wrote because it's like half of the song is kind of reggae-ish and half of it is metal, so it's like the Living Dead.
Oh,
Living
yeah,
Dread.
I get it.
So, but the beginning part is like. And so I can get like some nice bends out of having a little extra gain on there. But it
sounds like riff rock or something.
Yeah, it's like, and I listen to like a lot of like Umphreys and things like that. So it's I kind of like take influence from that too. But that pedal responds to how hard you play. So like the harder you dig in, you can get
The Archer does?
Yeah, you can get like a little more crunch out of it if you like really like wail on it,
I think that's what people always liked about those, is it kind of felt like a tube amp. How it
totally
crunches up a bit more.
Yeah, how they
as
like
you
it
drive
kind of seizes up a little bit. And it's like, and that's the only one that I found that really works for banjo. A lot of tube screamer and crunch type pedals get like super tinny and kind of like
they just go
they're a little
crazy.
harsh on the ears. So that one's super cool. That's like one of my favorites to use. And then after that, I go into. What do I go into? Oh, I have a Pog, like a synth, and I usually just have that with octave generator. It's just I usually just put the octave that I'm on up, and then the octave that I'm right, that's the next octave up, I put that one on as well. So then when you pick those two together, it kind of sounds like a steel drum.
Yeah.
And so I do like some islandy. Kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, cool.
And it
Calypso-y
translates
stuff,
super
yeah.
well to that. So like if we ever go into any sort of reggae jams or anything, I can like kick that on.
Oh, and especially if you have the Qtron on at the same time, that almost sounds
then
a
you
little
get
plunky.
like you get like kind of lasery things going on
water
there.
droplet type of sounds, yeah.
Plinko jams. Yes. And then I have then after that I go into just like a Phase 90 pedal, like the classic one that Pete Wernick used and stuff like that.
pedal,
That was
right,
like that was like one of the first pedals I ever bought after hearing that one Hot Rise live album. And that was like the first time it ever occurred to me to kind of, nice. They
Some mood lighting.
kicked on the mood lighting.
Yeah,
in
I'm liking this.
here. This is much more of an NPR setting now.
Yeah. Increase the intimacy.
Yes. And so that, I have that Phase 90, which is just super cool. It just banjo for some reason. It just translates really well to those weird phasey swirls. And then after that I have this delay pedal called a Flashback. And I actually got it right before we went into the studio to record our most recent album. It just came out a couple weeks ago, and it's called The Mirror Maid.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to that.
Yeah, and so Chris Pandolfi produced it, and he was so like blown away by the weirdness of this pedal and how I was using it, that he actually went and got one after the session, and he sent me a picture and showed me that he had it. But it's like
the flashback.
The flashback,
you're still talking about? Okay.
Yeah, and I got the second one. It's the flashback 2, but it basically has like an expression pedal on the top. So you can just like lean on the button a little bit, and it's kind of like having a volume pedal or something like that. But it'll basically just latch a hold of one of the notes that you're picking, and then it just kind of goes into freak out mode. It just kind of overloads. So like when you're playing it and it's delaying, then it'll just like latch onto just one and eventually just builds up into this.
It's like that analog
swirl.
Delay modulation
exactly.
Thing,
it's on the analog setting, and it's kind of like, we kind of use it. I kind of use it as like a blast off thing when we're like playing, and I'm like picking up, and then eventually just gets up high and just like it's almost like a bass drop or something, like a dubstep.
Just put it over the top.
Yeah, just something to kick it over if we're being super ridiculous, So that's super cool. And then I have like a pitch bender whammy pedal.
Yeah, I heard you mess with that.
That I use sometimes.
Is that the regular like red?
Yeah, just the big red
thing?
Classic thing. And I use that for some weird stuff, as some weird lasery sounds as well. But yeah.
So yeah, you don't even have any like examples that came before you of how to play banjo with this stuff. You get to invent your own thing.
Yeah, I've kind of like, that's just kind of been my approach since day one. Well, because basically how I learned banjo was basically the wrong way to do everything.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, that's just kind of what I say to people if they ask for any tips. I was like, you should ask other people for tips for sure, because I have no idea. Yeah, because when I started out, I was like playing, just with a guitar pick, tremolo, and then like I figured out how to play Scruggs style from just like watching bluegrass videos and looking at tablature on my own. And then from there, I just kind of went and, we were working on writing songs and sort of like formulating songs as a band. So I didn't do the usual where people learn a lot of fiddle tunes and they learn a lot of bluegrass melodies or a lot of Scruggs licks and stuff and kind of like chop up that way. I kind of just like went about it from learning from what we were writing and just kind of stuff that I was making up at the time, and especially with playing with pedals and stuff, kind of like techniques to use along with these pedals that I was experimenting with. So you
think the pedals actually maybe even changed the way you played?
Trying to have
those sounds in mind that you wanted to get.
Yeah, definitely. Like, as far as like just playing in a live setting, because we've always since the beginning tried to play and tour as much as we can. There was a few years when we were in college where we didn't tour out of Montana very much at all, but we've always like had the live setting in mind. So.
But touring out of Montana, like depending on where you are, you could be 10 hours away from being out of Montana, right? Like,
yes, yeah, and you could like, Montana's a big enough state that as like a college band or something that where you're just playing on the weekends, you can definitely travel to all sorts of different corners of the state and still be in your home state.
Haven't left the state.
Yeah,
exactly,
so and still like be able to there's not that many people in Montana at all, but still be further away from somewhere else where you're kind of in a different market, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, so the pedals definitely influenced. Experimenting with different sounds definitely influenced the first stuff that I learned, and then after I've only started to like really get into the bluegrass licks and like all the fiddle tunes and all the melodies that everyone learns like right off the bat. Those are like all just coming to me like within the past like 2 or 3 years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's kind of, I did everything super backwards.
Hey, everyone finds their own way somehow.
Yeah.
The Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Deering Banjos, who want you to know that banjo teachers love good times. In a recent survey conducted by Deering, over 200 banjo teachers were asked, how likely is it that you would recommend the good time banjo to your students? An overwhelming 85% responded that they would, with the number one reason being that good times are easy to play. Even Good Time Ambassador and 2019 IBMA Banjo Player of the Year Kristen Scott Benson agrees that you will not find a better banjo than this in the price range of the Deering Good Time. With the Good Time banjos, Deering understands the importance of starting out with a banjo that will help, not hinder your banjo learning experience. which is why they make sure that each and every Good Time Banjo leaves looking great, feeling great, and sounding great. For more information and to see exclusive videos from Good Time ambassadors Kristen Scott Benson and Pete Wernick, head over to deeringbanjos.com/teacherslovegoodtimes. So we were just talking about how your technique has developed in perhaps unique ways, perhaps unconventional ways, but it's the way it's been done.
Right.
When I was just watching you in there, I did notice that your right hand technique is kind of different.
Yes,
it's a bit more floaty.
It's a bit. I don't mount my fingers at all.
Right.
And I've tried to. Also, sometimes I do like on my bridge, and when I'm doing like single string, like Danny Barnes type shit, like I'll like mount my ring finger like on my bridge, like occasionally, but mostly, it's definitely like very free floating, and that's just part of like you just, I guess, figuring it out by myself. And no one ever really. I wasn't around enough people that played banjo professionally or super regularly when I first started out, so I didn't know that was even a thing that most people did.
So it wasn't by design necessarily, it was just what happened to feel natural to you?
Just what felt natural. And also I'm left-handed, so I am...
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm playing banjo right-handed, but I am left-handed, and I think that just came from when I first learned how to play guitar. With guitar, you definitely use your left hand more than your right hand, just because you're only strumming with a pick. So like that just made more sense to me to play right-handed, and just because you're going up and down the neck with your left hand, that just kind of felt more natural. But then when I switched to banjo, I was like, oh well, shit, you're using both,
And if you had started with that, you possibly might have.
I possibly might have played the other way,
yeah,
but I don't know. I also play drums in the right-handed setup, like if you're sitting down at a drum set, but also that just made sense to me because you're still hitting the snare with your left hand.
Okay.
So it's just seemed more natural to me with your dominant. It's
kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other in terms of where your strengths are going to be.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've definitely encountered some people that were like, why don't you mount your hand? And when I was like, well, I don't know. I I have no idea.
Well, it's a good thing you did, man, because finding a left-handed banjo has got to be one of the larger pains.
I can't imagine. Yeah, I know some people that are left-handed players. I'm just like, damn, like that's got to be just the biggest pain in the ass. I noticed it also lets you do a bit more of kind of quasi strumming. Yeah, so sometimes and that kind of just lends to there only being 4 of us on stage, so we don't have a fiddle or a dobro, so we don't have any legato. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the smashing the ones and stuff is the way another way to like build the jams on stage, because we play a lot of bluegrass, but we're basically a jam band or a rock band. We have a lot of long songs and we do a lot of in and outs of through different songs. So yeah, like one way, that's like one way that we found to build it, just because we've never, held on to a fiddle player, we've never found one that we really vibed with. There's plenty of fiddle players that we vibe with, but they're all in our friends' bands now. So
yeah. The scheduling has to also work out too. Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's one way that we found, and also just to get more sound on stage. And also, I do most of the singing in our band, so kind of just it's just kind of a natural thing that I think that happens sometimes when we're playing certain parts, and I just have to like hit a big thumb strum or something. At certain parts when I'm singing or something. It's definitely like a lot of it. Yeah, definitely is a weird like sometimes like if we're playing like slower, like funkier shit. Kind of like big strums with the thumb. But yeah, that's part of just I think from learning how to play while singing all the time, and also there just being 4 of us on stage.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Playing banjo with singing is kind of a notoriously difficult thing to do.
Yeah, hard thing to wrap your head around.
At least if you're trying to do some rolls or whatever.
Yeah, and I've always been very impressed with guys that can like really dig in there with their rolls and sing sing regularly. And I've noticed like, I guess I didn't notice back in the day when we were going to the shows all the time, but since becoming a banjo player regularly, I've noticed that like Dave Johnson will like just kind of drop out when he's like singing lead on some parts of a song, you know.
Yeah.
Which is like, you know, kind of the old school way to do it, kind of the traditional bluegrass way to do it. But that just never really appealed to me, I guess. So I just
You always wanted to hear that presence.
Yeah, always. Yeah, we did. We always kind of needed that presence on stage if there's only 4 of us, you know. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's go back to talking about your new album, not just to plug it, but I'm really curious as a huge Pandolfi fanboy.
Yeah,
you know,
man.
how you roped him and got him involved, and what sort of role he played, and how that affected you as a banjo player during that process.
Dude, it was crazy. So technically our second album, but the first one that's like that we put out that is like available to the public and stuff, that wasn't, you know, kind of like a college music effort, you know.
Right. A bit more pro.
Yeah, it's called Ghost in the Bottle, and it's like 4 or 5 years old now, but it was produced by Andy Thorne, and who we just like met from him coming to Big Grass actually in Montana, which is like kind of the equivalent of Winter Wondergrass, where you go up and ski, and everyone stays at the mountain and stuff, but then there's tons of bluegrass shows going on and stuff.
And everyone's playing in their ski outfits because you have to.
Yeah, well, actually, all the Big Sky shows are inside. They're all in the hotels, in like ballrooms and stuff.
Much better.
But it's all, you know, we met him from him coming to that, and him just kind of he went to our opera set, and there was like, and that's where we're from. It's at Big Sky, and we're from Bozeman, so it was like a raging opera set of like, you know, 500 people or whatever. He just wandered in.
Opera? What are you saying?
Opera?
I'm not
it's a
familiar
French
with
word.
this
It's after you're done skiing for the day. Après ski it means after ski. So it's like 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. is like après. It's like happy hour. Basically.
Is this like a ski town lingo thing?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I forget
that's my issue then.
I forget where I am.
There's a lot of skiers in Michigan, but I'm whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Not something I've been into as much.
Totally. Yeah. Après ski.
How do you spell that?
It's APRES.
Okay.
And I think there's like a little over the E.
Right.
You know.
The French accent.
Yes, exactly. So he just kind of wandered in, and that's how we met him. And so he produced that album, and then we went to get, you know, put this second album together, and we're like, well, you know, having a producer definitely helped, and having someone there to like show you the ropes and, you know, just kind of show you the tricks and tell you what you're doing wrong, or, you know, just kind of point you in the right direction is a huge, huge benefit. And I think Sean was the first. He's like, why don't we just do another banjo player? And I was like, awesome. Yeah, let's do another you know, And so I think we just like, I had like had a couple interactions with the guys from the String Dusters from playing at festivals, but not like a ton. And I think we just like, we just kind of hit Panda up and asked if that was something he'd be into, because we knew other bands that he'd kind of worked on other projects with, and he was like, absolutely. And we kind of had a little meeting with him at Blue Ox one day and kind of hung out. Yeah, then after that, we just kind of got to know him and be friends with the String Dusters guys, and which has been super cool. And like having him around. We called it the Panda effect, which is something Max came up with, which is basically like it's just gaining knowledge or becoming a better musician kind of through osmosis, or like through exposure, being around other better musicians for an extended period of time.
Just the
just
attitude he brings?
And just like little ideas or little, you know, things that like he would say that never occurred to you, or he would be like, why don't ask you, like, you know, why don't you try like this? He would never tell us to do something a certain way. He would just, you know, kind of make suggestions, and he was really awesome to have him as a producer, because we all had a very solid plan going into the studio, but also he was always, you know, absolutely 100% interested in what we had to say and the way that we wanted to do things.
Yeah.
But he's just that kind of guy, you know. Pretty sure he has a PhD in banjo, like, so he's, you know, he's just that knowledgeable and methodical of a guy that we just picked up a lot of things from him along the way. And also we really vibe with those guys from the String Dusters too, because they're also, you know, like a lot of them are from the East Coast and grew up going to the Dead or going to Fish, and like the young freshman year wooks in us just like, connected to that, back in the day when there used to be a lot more patchwork in the band.
Yeah, there's a kinship happening. Yeah,
Yes.
that's really cool.
And he didn't try to make us sound like any other band, like he was interested in just the way we approach things. Because I guess I've always said, like, if we're nothing else, we're unique or we're original. We don't take a lot of things from other people, or we're not trying to copy anyone else.
Sure.
We're never like trying to do anything in anyone else's style. So I think he was really stoked on that, and also just like the weirdness that we bring to the table, just from the people that we are. That banjo metal song is on that album, and
right.
there's also an interlude that we put in there because it's called The Quail, and it's because that he was like, what are we going to call this? And I was like, well, we should call it The Quail-lude because it's an interlude. And someone in the studio was like, that's a terrible idea. And Panda was like, we're doing that, man.
Right.
But it's like it just is this weird Space Jam thing that happened live one time, just kind of out of nowhere, and we just decided to redo it. And now it's like it's a live segment that we kind of slip into jams here and there.
Oh, that's great.
But it's we put it on there just because it was the idea of putting these weird interludes in there, because I've been getting really into like Anderson .Paak and like Kendrick Lamar and Thundercat and things like that. All these sort of like avant-garde hip hop rap artists that put weird. It's like a jam, it's like a segue that you'd see at a Fish show or at a String Duster show or whatever. But it's in between these two songs. But it's just on the album as like an interlude.
Yeah.
And they kind of like, and they slip these in all over the place, and even into their live shows, especially Anderson .Paak. And it just kind of like takes on this weird, like jam or like jazzy quality.
Yeah, it's like a song idea that just never got finished.
Yeah,
and you let it happen live.
And you just let it, And so we kind of like took that idea, and I think that's an idea we're going to kind of keep going with in the future. We've already talked about some other weird things to do it, but basically, we just tried to. We didn't try to make specifically a bluegrass album. We just tried to make our album, so it has all of the weird qualities that all of us have, and Panda was super good at accentuating that.
Yeah, that's a real skill that you would have to have. I imagine.
Yes.
As a banjo player, was he giving you banjo specific ideas?
Yeah, he gave me all these warm ups that I can play. A lot of these warm ups that he showed me, because he's super into what's it called, Alexander technique.
Yeah, right.
So because he injured himself way back in the day, and basically he had to go back at one point and relearn how to play because his shoulder was so messed up.
Injured himself like from
I think
from
it's just
playing
a
or
repetitive
like
strain.
okay.
And so he like had to like play sitting in front of a mirror, and if you notice now when he plays, his posture is like impeccable. When he's on stage, he's just like straight up and down the whole time. But he's like, the way I think about it is like, you don't necessarily just want to like pick up the banjo and just like rip and just like right off the bat. He's like you want to like kind of warm your tendons up, and because everything's all connected all the way from your fingertips up to your shoulder to your spine. And
sure.
And so he's like, when you think, like he showed me all these weird warm-ups to do that's basically just like going up and down, but it's like, but they're unique enough scales. I feel that
do you remember them enough to like show?
I have one that I still have one that I regularly practice. He showed me a few, but I think it's the only one that I remember. But it's just it's like you're playing in G minor, but it's B. It's a lot of B flat scales. So it's all forward rolls. And then it comes back to G minor. And he had a lot of things like that he would just kind of show me that was just working up and down the neck and kind of like warming up your hands and kind of getting prepared, you know, when you're like getting ready to play a show or
Just
something.
doing them
Stuff
like at that tempo,
yeah,
basically,
doing them at
where
a
it's
slow
not-
tempo which is hard for me to do because we kind of like we started out as like just kind of like a raging drunk college bluegrass band, you know. So we were like playing. We're just now, you know, within the past couple of years, getting into playing in more of like a, well, you know, standard or like medium paced bluegrass style. You know, we used to just like rage all of our songs. Basically, we're a better band now than we used to be.
You can finesse it a little bit better.
There's a little. It's not like it's not so punk rock anymore. So so I've been working a lot about that. And there's another one that my friend Augie, who's in a band called Armchair Boogie, they're from Wisconsin. They're kind of like they're a bluegrass band, but like funk grass band kind of. They have drummer and electric bass and stuff. But he showed me this Tony Trishka one that he'd been working on that I can't remember what song it is, what tune it's from that Tony Trishka wrote, but it's
Okay.
just kind of this weird like descending.
Yeah, just getting your way
melodic
around
thing.
the fingerboard a bit.
Yeah, and I guess it probably doesn't come like as much of a revelation to a lot of people that like started out playing all these fiddle tunes and stuff. But this is like, you know, this is kind of newer stuff to me within the past like couple years. You know, just kind of getting used to all these weird, you know, nicer sounding, you know, weird melodic things, but.
I can't help but wonder, and tell me if you have any ideas about this. Is there something about banjo players that lends themselves to producing records? Because like one of the last people I talked to was Pau from Che Apalache.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Bela just produced them, and Panda and Thorn are producing you guys. Wes Corbett is doing quite a bit of producing, and
Right.
it seems like they're all just killing it.
And
I don't know what to say about that.
I don't know either. I know like a lot of banjo players used to be like, or at least a lot of them that I know used to be drummers. So like I feel like there's like a rhythmic thing that kind of connects them with other people. I also feel like a lot of banjo players that I know too are like, you know, almost like scientific kind of dudes, you know, like really intelligent, but also very like methodical in the way, you know, like Greg List has a PhD in microbiology.
Sure,
and like you know, but that's like I think that because that's where I am coming from, because I have a degree in environmental biology, and so like. And Panda has a PhD. His is in banjo, but it's all, you know, it's from.
We also went to like Ivy League school.
Yeah,
right?
I think
Dartmouth?
he went to Berkeley, maybe. But,
He went to Berkeley for music.
but
I guess we shouldn't both just be speculating. About
I'll just tell
resume.
him after this that we were, making up lies about him.
I think he won a Nobel
podcast.
Prize at some point, and I think he was president of the United States, and then I think he was MacArthur Genius Grant.
He's Mother Teresa, actually. No, but like, you know, and guys like Noam Pikelny or some, like, you know, I just feel like when you talk to them, you know, they're very methodical, and a lot of things that they do are sort of like well calculated.
So they approach it maybe from like a more academic type of standpoint.
It's not it's not just like, you know, because there is like a certain tendency as a musician, or, you know, as like a bluegrass musician or a jam musician, to, you know, maybe just the like, fuck it, we'll do it live kind of mentality that comes along, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can produce, you know, super cool moments. But I just think, I don't know, I just think maybe people that are banjo players and that tend to be producers maybe they're a little just more methodical humans.
It is kind of a mathy instrument, right?
That's what I was going to say. I don't know if it's a result of playing banjo or if it's as a result of being a nerdy guy that draws you to playing the banjo. Yeah,
there's a chicken or the egg there somewhere.
Yeah,
but
it's like the metal guitar player kind of guy. Like they're all. You know, we have like a lot of friends that are metal musicians, and like as far as I know, it's not so much of the crazy rock star thing that it used to be. It's more, they're all like a lot of nerdy guys
Yeah.
that are, they're all, very mathematical in the way they play things. Because, the people that are into metal music that aren't musicians, those are the weird people. They're more into it for the folklore of the whole thing,
The anarchy and the rebellion and
yes,
the attitudes and the mosh pits.
Yes,
and
and the fantasy that goes along with,
Yeah, I don't know firsthand exactly, but I think I've been around enough that I think I have a good idea of what you mean.
Yeah, a little more of a Viking mentality,
Exactly.
Yes.
So what type of things are you working on these days? You said you were coming back around to fiddle tunes, or I don't know, like a typical practice routine.
For you.
I
guess a lot of it. I mean, obviously, a lot of it is writing because we always want to be putting out new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I've been. I was just speaking of metal. I've been working. I've been working on me and Pan have been sending these licks back and forth. That just kind of came from that recording session of Mermaid, where there's one really metal part in there that the background of it is the backbeat is. But then my solo over it gets it's just super it gets kind of Lydian feel, but it's also just a lot of using the wrong notes in the right places. So kind of a little Middle Eastern feel. So we've been sending a lot of licks back and forth of that kind of
right.
Sorry, I'm terribly out of tune. So I've been a lot of stuff that we've been working on, just kind of instrumentals. Just in the band, I've been kind of prog rocky recently. So we've been there's one a lot of it is just me riffing and recording stuff and trying to think of new stuff to put in our instrumentals. But there's one that I've been messing. And a lot of it comes from knowing some of our friends Billy Strings or
Sure.
people where we're all kind of grew up being metal or punk rock kids, and now it's really translating over into the way we play and
There's a lot more similarities between that stuff and bluegrass than people probably think.
Absolutely. We do random punk covers sometimes, and it just translates over so perfectly. It's just Four on the Floor. We have covered Less Than Jake in the past, and things like Green Day or stuff like that. And it just works out so perfectly. But but more recently, I've been getting more into or back into, I should say, things like Tool and stuff like that are more a little more mathematical and kind of a little more technique involved than punk rock. But so there's what was the one I was which a lot of my practice session just starts with going through a lot of those riffs and just kind of remembering them from the day before, trying to add on stuff to them.
Yeah, for sure. Is that how most of your writing happens? It starts with a riff? Is that?
Yeah, sometimes in a lot. Sometimes it starts with words or phrases. Lyrics are lyrics are hard for me. That's more on the harder end for me than the instrumental part. And our mandolin player Sean writes a lot of our songs, but he doesn't sing, so he has me sing all of his songs. He writes. So he sends over a lot of lyrics and stuff, and then a lot of times I'll write the hook or the melody.
So a lot of the songs are a co-written.
Yeah, and usually we just give the credit to whoever came up with the chord progression and words and stuff, and then just say it was arranged by the Kitchen Dwellers. Sure. But usually my practice session just starts with me playing something that was in my head or something like that. But then I've been getting really into more, I guess, melodic banjo. I've been working on my Scruggs stuff, but my Scruggs just straight up old school Scruggs is not as up to par as I would like it to be. But Cuckoo's, the Hartford Cuckoo's Nest. like try to work. I try to do stuff like that really like stretches my hand. It's a lot of like back and forth, kind of like you're holding the tennis ball in your hand the whole time, you know?
Yeah.
Right. To get work on my dexterity and playing slower too, obviously just trying to like chill out and get, you know, make sure all the right notes are in there.
Feel all of that, right? Yeah.
Instead of just half-assing it, you know?
Totally.
But, I think that's like a good amount of my practice session is, doing stuff like that. And then just like, try to rip a couple fiddle tunes when I get warmed up and so get the juices flowing, you know?
What advice do you have for people that are in highly improvisational situations like you find yourself? Because that's probably unusual for a lot of people.
We're definitely like more of a jam band than a lot of our friends' bands, you know, like a lot of bands we're friends with, you know, like bands we grew up with or like, you know, being friends with and are still friends with, but you know, the bands we got started with, like the Little Smokies are from Montana as well.
Right.
So like we were all like in college sort of at the same time and like we opened for them in Missoula and they would come to Bozeman and open for us.
Trade
and, like,
gigs.
And
stuff,
we like, and those are the brothers. Like we've known them for a long time. So like, you know, to see like both of our bands kind of like coming up at the same time is like a super, you know,
that's
for both of our,
cool.
both of our first Red Rocks gigs were like within the same summer. Like that's, you know, that's a really cool thing to think about, you know? But yeah, so like, but their thing is totally different than our, you know, like their style of, and their approach to bluegrass is like completely different. They're more towards the folky and like indie side of it. Would not to say that I'm not into it. I love a lot of bands, you know, that me and Andy talk about, like Dawes or Deer Ticker, some of those like indie country rock bands, you know. But their approach is totally different. We have our buddy here tonight, Adam Gruel from Horseshoes and Hand Grenades is opening for us. He's been opening for us the whole week, and he, you know, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades thing is completely different from ours. And we did a whole tour together. We play together all the time, and we're, you know, best friends with those guys and have been for like 10 years. But theirs is totally like a Midwest bluegrass, you know, sort of pert near sandstone stomp kind of thing, you know. And they totally have their own thing. So it's kind of, I feel like they still jam. They still do jams and do go into other songs, but it's more of a bluegrass approach than a lot of our jams. A lot of our jams get a lot weirder for sure.
Yeah.
But I would say the thing that we're always working on and really trying to work on is just being patient. The biggest thing, you come to find out, it doesn't even matter like what sort of jam you go into. It might not even be your favorite sort of thing you're doing at the moment, but if you just hold on to it for long enough, sometimes, like, you know, there's a reason that like Fish will go and play for 20 minutes at the beginning of their second set, or, you know, their first song of their second set is 20 minutes long because it takes them 20 minutes to get to a certain place where everyone's like, holy shit, what is happening? What is this thing we're staring at across the stadium, you know, right now? And that's the moment of every Fish show that is written about the next day that comes out. They're like, this was the thing last night, you know? And I've heard Trey talk about that he's like in interviews and stuff, and he's like, that's why we play for that long, is sometimes we need that long to get into that space. And you know, like John Bell from Widespread Panic talks about like respecting that headspace when you get to that point on stage, and not trying to rush it and not trying to rush anyone else, but also just like, you know, it's a very like a Zen kind of living in the moment, being very present for it, you know, kind of like a meditation approach to it. And so, I always feel like the worst way to botch a jam isn't even like, it's not playing any wrong notes or, you know, do anything that could be necessarily considered wrong musically. It's just like pulling the ripcord too quick and just being like, we got to get out of this.
And it only takes one of you to ruin it.
It only takes one person to be like, we got to change this. I'm not comfortable with this moment on stage. You know, it only takes one person to be like, to not vibe, and then it just doesn't work out.
So there's like a buy-in that has to, like maybe you've talked about it, maybe you haven't, but it has to happen where everyone's on that,
where everyone gets on the same
understanding
page.
That,
And but you know, it also like it just gets better the more you play together, though. Also, like, you know,
of course.
we've been really hammering it this year and staying super busy. We had a really long summer and you know, went right into a long fall tour and stuff, and now it just really feels like we're all just like firing on all cylinders. And this past week, even though we weren't together for the 3 weeks prior, has just been really awesome.
That's
as far
great.
as improv goes and stuff. So So I guess that's my advice is just to be patient. Be patient with yourself, I guess, as well as other people that you're on stage with.
Yeah, I
feel
think
like
that
that's
is really
a
important.
a key moment, a key idea to finding a certain understanding on stage. You know.
Yeah, that's. I'm really glad you brought that up because that's not what I had in mind when I asked that. But that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, and sometimes and there's a lot of even our band loves dissonance too. So there's some jams get into and which I've seen Leftover Salmon, do things like that too, where it gets super weird. But it also, if you come out of that and you get to the other side of that into something that's epic, it's that much more, encompassing for everyone in the room when you come out of that. It's it's the tension and release thing that.
And when everyone's been on that journey the whole time.
Yeah, and sometimes the Dusters are super good at it too. Of
course,
it's a classic Fish thing, but the Dusters are super. They'll play their, what's that one melody that. It's Fork in the Road or one of those, but they'll do that. They'll pass that around at the end of that jam, and but it'll get into everyone in the crowd starts being oh shit, and then when it comes back again, everyone starts jumping up and down, and that's a pinnacle moment,
And it's amazing how much Travis controls all of that.
Man.
It all comes down to him.
Especially after you meet Travis and hang out with Travis.
What you're saying, he knows it, and
no, more so. I feel like he absolutely looks like he knows it, and he's very good at being that wasn't what I planned at all, or something. He's such a funny dude. We've had some hilarious times with the Dusters recently, and Travis is just a fucking wild cat, man. He's awesome. He's so awesome. Such a great bass player to have on stage with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think when I first got a hold of you, weren't you doing shows with them down in North Carolina a few weeks ago?
Yes, that was a 2-week run, and it kind of started. It started on Halloween in Philly, and it went down all the way down to North Carolina. So
yeah, great.
Yeah.
So we got to get you to the gig, man.
Yes,
but before you go, just give us the information about how everyone can find you and your music online and everything they need to know to plug the band and all that stuff.
So you can find us at kitchendwellers.com and on Facebook and Instagram. All of our tour dates are on social media and on our website. And we have an online store on our website. You can find all of our albums and stuff on Spotify and all the streaming services.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys for the first time. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah,
and
thanks for having me, man. Glad we could do it.
Much appreciated.
Hell yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to that episode featuring Torrin Daniels of the Kitchen Dwellers, recorded at the Otis Supply venue in Ferndale, Michigan. The sound clips you heard in order was a song called Foundation, performed by the Kitchen Dwellers, a tune called Thornado, performed by Andy Thorne, The Living Dread, performed by Kitchen Dwellers, Shady Grove, performed by Hot Rise, and The Quail, performed by the Kitchen Dwellers. Thank you once again to the Patreon supporters of this podcast. That was Annie Caps and Rich and Susan Southward. You can become a supporter at patreon.com/banjopodcast. Contact the show, pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. But that's going to do it for me. Hang in there, everybody, and I will see you next time.